Hi, this is Alex Orris, Classroom Technology Integration Specialist for Bullock and Roberts Middle Schools in Cuyahoga Falls. This is part two of creating a Google Sheet that gives student ownership of their grades. So far, we've created a spreadsheet table, and this video is going to have um, some more advanced features, including in A8, cell A8, we're going to add a mean. And what we're going to ask this row to do is to calculate the average score for that week. I want this row to stand out, so I always tell my students, I want you to change this row, and by clicking on the number 8, highlights the entire row, and make it special, make it bold, change its font color to something bright. I'll pick a bright blue, and that way as we type in these cells, it's going to be that color. Okay, we usually practice with this by having the student select B2 to B7, and noticing in the bottom right-hand corner that it starts to make some predictions. Down here we have a sum, and there's our average, our minimum score and our maximum score, and even the count. And obviously the average or the mean is calculated by taking the sum of the numbers and dividing it by how many there are. So 498 and a half divided by 6 is about an 83. And what I like to do is while the students have this selected, we find and insert a function, those same scores, those same math calculations that are frequently used. Now there are more, but we are going for the average, the mean score. So since we've selected B2 to B7, and when we click insert a function as an average, it puts it right below. And we can tell here the formula says that in this cell, we would like it to equal the average of the data set B2 to B7. And it gives me a preview there, an 83%. So hitting enter locks that percentage, that average score in. So right here, it's showing the average, but notice in the bar, in the cell, it's actually a calculation. And this little blue button, again, the one that we used for the weeks to make it make a prediction, we're going to drag this across. Let me do the first 3 weeks here. We're going to drag this across so we can see that it's done a new calculation. It's done the average of the set D2 to D7, the 6 rows above that cell. And we always talk to students about this error message. The error is because the evaluation is caused by dividing by 0. There's an error. Well, because there's no data here, you can't divide anything by 0. So it gives an error, and we always tell students, that's a good error to have. We actually want that error for all of our future weeks. So I'm going to take that formula and drag it all the way across. And that way when they get to week 10, it's going to calculate the average of K2 to K7, the cells above it. And what this error really is helpful for, when they get to week 10 and they start putting in their grades like an 85, it's going to automatically start calculating that average. When I put in a 75, I'm going to find the scores between. And it's kept my conditional format that we set in the first video about changing colors. Okay, so I'll get rid of these scores. I'm working right now on 2 data points. I'm working on my week 1 and my week 3. And students can notice a trend here. You know, even though I've gone up in subjects and down in some subjects, overall my average score has dropped. Okay, this repeating decimal sometimes gives students, you know, a visual that they don't always like and teachers don't always like. And since it's repeating 6s, we like to round either to the nearest whole number or, like Progress Book did, to the nearest hundredths. So you could actually use these as rounding places. We could decrease the number of decimal points down to the hundredths. And right now we're in the thousandths, and notice the 7, when I round down one more time, it should have this go up to 9 hundredths. Let's see. There we go. 83 and 9 hundredths. Okay. So since we changed colors in row 8, I also tell the students, let's change the color in row 1. Let's go up here and let's, you know, they could change the font, but they could make row 1 a little bit bigger. And they could make it a dark background. I'm going to go back to that same blue I picked, but this is your font color. This is called your fill color. It's the background color. So I have them make the background color something dark, and I picked the color that matched my row 8. but also to have them then make the font color something light to make it stand out a little different. Okay, so I've got my table set. The last thing I usually work with students on is taking the table, which is all of our data, and I want to see it more visual. I want to see it in a graph form. So we've practiced selecting cells. This time I'm going to ask them to select the whole table. So from A1 all the way to K8. To select the whole table and to go to Insert, dropping down here to a chart. Okay, we've talked about how this is a math program before and how it starts to make predictions. It's made a really good one here, a really good graph to compare each of my subjects and my weekly scores is a bar graph, a double bar graph. And if I had 5 scores, it would be basically a bar graph for each subject comparing. Okay, so this one's really valuable. I'm going to customize it a little bit because the title is off. It's just giving me the title of week 1 and week 3. So I can make that much better by maybe doing something like Mr. Orris's progress or Mr. Orris's grades. And it changes automatically. And then down below, my horizontal axis right now is labeled subject, and that's great. But I have no vertical axis. No vertical axis that's labeled. So I'm going to choose the drop-down menu to change the axis to left vertical, and I'm going to title this whatever these numbers represent. So in this case, it's percentage. I want that to label percentage next to my grades. Okay. And then the last thing here for this graph, the minimum and maximum is our scale. And right now our scale is being automatically zoomed in to show the top 50%. In other words, this choir score, if we were to cover these numbers up, that looks really low. Like students might think that's a 20%. And it's because the graph is a little misleading. It starts at 50 instead of 0. So I always have them look at what their graph would look like if they went from 0 to 100. And that shows a much different picture. Now my choir score is a 60, looks proportional. It's a lot higher. Going back to the old one, by taking these numbers out, it's showing that this choir score, proportionally looks like about a fourth of that score, which isn't really the case. So I really like seeing the whole picture. I like looking at 0 to 100. Okay, so I've got my title changed and my graph is ready to be inserted. When you click insert, it actually puts the graph like a picture that you can change the size of or move around right with my data. So I usually have my students put that where they can kind of monitor it alongside of their graph. And what happens is in week 4, and we're going to keep our fingers crossed a little bit, if my grade drops to an 80, we typically see the graph change automatically. If it doesn't, I can look back in my settings and in my advanced edit settings at the recommendations and notice, unfortunately, it made a prediction that I don't like. It went from the entire table to skipped C, and now it doesn't have anything past D. So I'm going to make this change and see if this works. We're going to change A1 to B8 and make that K8 again, what we had the first time. And there it included my week 4 score in ELA. Let me update that and let's go to week 5 and see if it's ready to make the automatic adjustment. There it is. So there's a 79, and not only did it drop below my goal and change colors, it's graphing it along the way. So just to put some more scores in here to see this build, maybe an 85 now, and this is up to a 75, and this is dropped to an 82, a 90, and a 90. So students can see that my score has gone up. And this way, same thing, just some random scores. Let me get most of my grades here around my goal. Noticing it's changing the colors to red for the ones that drop below my goal. And I want to really, really fall off in math here in a second, because when I drop my math score to 60, it actually has dropped my average to below my goal. And notice here that it has created a score that's less than my goal. All right, this concludes part 2. Part 3, we're going to do one more type of graph.